I would like to call to order the March 1st, 2023 Citizen Advisory Committee meeting. Can we start with roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. At this time, I'm only asking those CAC members attending in person to respond by saying here when I call your name. I want to remind you to unmute your microphones by pushing the button on the base prior to responding. It will turn red. Brian Rossi,
Here.
Lily Charlotte Landstrom,
Here.
Aquanette Tyson Thomas is absent. Kate Layton,
Here.
James Garvin,
Here.
Mark Bruner,
Here.
Ramona Bean, Paula Ryan,
Here.
Jim Knight,
Here.
James Bonfiglio,
Here.
Richard Vasilati,
Here.
Sammy Brown, Mark Forrest, BJ Mishra,
Here.
Francisco Gill is absent. Myra Newman,
Here.
Harry Brown, Greg Fagan is absent. The municipalities of Belle Glade, Lake Worth Beach, and the Port of Palm Beach are vacant and will be marked as absent for this meeting. Albert Richwagen, Wending.
Here.
There is a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And there any updates to the minutes? If not, can I have a motion to adopt, please?
Second.
I have a motion by Mark and a second by James. Did I get that right? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay, motion carries. We're going to move to 1E, which is the instructions on public comments. The instructions on how to provide public comments are included in the agenda. Are there any general public comments?
Not at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any CAC member comments at this time? That's not on the agenda. Okay, let me, if you don't mind, I have to say these next few words. So if there's anybody participating remotely, please use the raise hand feature in the Zoom platform. And remember to unmute your microphone. We don't have any virtual members. Okay, perfect. So, all right, Richard. All yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a Board of County Commissioners meeting, and during that meeting, there was a huge discussion about water in Palm Beach County. Many people spoke, and a couple of things really stood out. The Vice Mayor of the Jupiter Inlet Colony spoke about how Lake Okeechobee is contaminated with algae and other pollutants, and you guys have heard me talk about this before. How it decimates the Treasure Coast with the blue-green algae, and everybody knows that already. Then former County Commissioner and City Commissioner Jeff Coons spoke. I believe he has about 20 years of elected service between the two cities and the county there. He was introduced as Mr. Water, and I know he has a massive background on water. He goes on to say that when he became a city commissioner in 1989, they sat down and they go, so Flagler dug a ditch, and the water from West Palm Beach comes from Flagler's ditch, and Flagler's ditch water comes from Lake Okeechobee. I'm assuming that Flagler, he's referring to Henry Flagler, who established City West Palm Beach's water in the late 1800s. And that ditch is either the M Canal or the L8 Canal or both. So that water from Lake Okeechobee comes from the Kissimmee River, which the headwaters from the Kissimmee River are the parking lots of Disney World. So basically, you're drinking water from the parking lots of Disney World, which would be City of West Palm Beach's drinking water. Funny thing is, I've actually heard about this a couple of years ago, and I saw something. I'm going to go research back where I found it. I might have it in my notes, that not only the parking lots, but also all the golf courses with the pesticide and fertilizer runoff ends up in the Kissimmee River, Lake Okeechobee, and all the way to a tap right on the other side of that wall. So 34 years or longer, this has been discussed and talked about and all this contamination. And you know that I've spoke about all the construction that West Palm has done on the wetlands. But a short road behind Ibis is the end of the world for the city of West Palm Beach's drinking water. We all know that that is not true. So I'm going to stop on that topic. And I do have one more thing I would like to talk about. Just recently in Ohio, we had that terrible train derailment that's possibly ruined that entire area for people to ever even live in again. And it's awful. And I feel bad for them. On the same token, we have a lot of railways around here. And one of our railways is a CSX rail line that runs straight down the B line, inches from Grassy Waters Preserve. And I just wonder if anybody ever said, wow, this could be the end of the world for our drinking water. And I bet you not. So it's just another hypocrisy on the part of the city where they should say, hey, you know what? This road is going to benefit everyone, including Ibis and Palm Beach Gardens and unincorporated Loxahatchee and way beyond. So these are just things I'm going to continue to talk about until this road is built or I'm no longer walking on this planet. So thank you for your time and listening.
Okay, thank you so much. Does any other member have comments? Okay, so we're gonna move to the CAC liaisons report.
Madam Chair, if I may, we do have one new member.
Oh, okay.
Lily Charlotte Landstrom is joining us from the city of Boynton Beach. So I don't want to give a.
Oh, yeah,
second or not.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lily Charlotte Landstrom. I'm going to be the representative for the city of Boynton Beach. We're really excited to join everyone here. The work the Citizens Advisory Council does, speaking on behalf of their cities, is very important. You know, as a young person who's lived in Palm Beach County their whole life, I've seen how this county has changed, and I've seen, you know, where improvements could have been made, but they never were. So I'm really excited to get to have some say and stuff, also to get to fraternize with everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Oh, yeah, Ryan.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to speak to the city that I represent. You know, it's funny. I've been on this board for, I guess it's a couple of years now, and most of the time, everybody that I know and friends and family, they, you know, compliment the work that we do. Everybody was very excited about Brightline for the city of Boca Raton. I certainly was. So everything was very positive then. And then the opening of the diverging diamond interchange happened on Glades Road, and suddenly everybody said, why did you do that? And I said, well, I didn't do anything. I said, but I've heard a lot about it. I'm happy to present some of the feedback from the public, at least, that have gotten in touch with me. There seems to still be a great deal of confusion on what the benefits of that DDI are for the area. I haven't come across, and I'm just being honest about it, one person that has thought that this is a great idea, especially for an intersection that, for anybody that's grown up there like me, has been a source of irritation for many decades. And I don't think that people see what this has done to improve it. So I'm wondering if maybe the TPA would consider, you know, some kind of public education outreach to members of the community there to let them know what the benefit is actually supposed to be for this. I mean, I've saw our you know, city commissioners or council members, you know, share a lot of information on it, you know, on their social media platforms, but I don't think that did very much to give confidence to the public on why this was a good idea. So I'm just relaying the message from people that I've spoken to, you know, downtown throughout the city of Boca and the community. And I hope that at some point, maybe there can be some greater outreach to help them understand why this is a good thing, if it is a good thing. Thank you.
I think that's a really good idea. It's also, it's been a long time since we've seen a DDI presentation as an advisory board also. I know that FDOT, they have their interchange master plan where they are analyzing and assessing DDI up and down this area. They're like, I believe Palm Beach Lakes and even 45th Street was analyzed like a few years ago. But I don't think maybe, is it something that we can request FDOT to give us a little education also as the board in, because I agree. I personally have not driven that DDI. I don't go that far west. So as far as I-95. But
Well, you're lucky. I've done it 3 times now,
yeah,
and there's a lot, I've survived, but
congratulations.
there's a lot of traffic still.
I think you're right. I think it's it's kind of like introducing a roundabout to a new community or a double roundabout, right? It's there's a lot of confusion around it. But I think that would be as for FDOT to begin to implementing these throughout the county, it would be helpful for them to start with education.
Thank you for that. We can follow up with FDOT about getting a presentation about that. And just to follow up on the ones that are coming up in our county. We have 45th Street, Lantana Road, Hypoluxa Road, 10th Ave, and I think potentially Linton. So
Yeah.
all the first 4 I mentioned are going to be DDIs, and Linton might be considered for that as well. So they're going to be coming along in our county in the future here. So there has been a lot of work. I know that we post a lot with social media from FDOT when it came to Glades Road interchange and try to get the word out on our side as well. And they have been doing some things, but I'll follow up with them and see when it comes to Glades Road, how that's going for the status. So we can provide a status to you next week or next month on that. And then we'll also ask them about a future presentation.
Do they have any drone footage or anything like that for the I know it's right next to the airport, so it's probably really difficult to get videos, but I would assume because like FDOT as part of their projects, they have their website is very detailed with technical stuff that as a for an average person, they wouldn't be able to interpret it. But if there's some photos and just some exhibits that we can help get the words out for really our neighbors, right? Because both Ryan and I live in Boca, that'll be really helpful. That would be a request to FDOT, not to staff.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could you repeat those, the interchanges again, please? I didn't get them written down.
Yes, I-95, they're all I-95.
Right, right.
45th Street, Lantana Road, Hypoluxa Road, 10th Ave, and then potentially Linton Boulevard.
Yes, Paula.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question about the Glades interchange because I was on the board a million years ago when the design was being finalized or the implementation of construction. But I remember there was a lot of discussion about the walkability and accessibility with bikes and whatnot. Is that the biggest concern, or what is the greatest concern about the interchange?
And again, this is just feedback from the public, but generally speaking, I think everybody expected that somehow all the traffic density was going to disappear once this went into effect. And they're still sitting there waiting for the lights to change, just like they were before. But it hasn't done anything to speed up the Glades congestion. I think is basically, everybody just says, why did you do this? Why did they do this? I said, I'll take your comments. So here they are.
And Nathan on our staff just reminded me that they haven't opened it up for full capacity yet. So it's only partially opened. So I think they're still adding the full amount of lanes will be opened up in the near future here.
Another 18 months. Okay, great. Maybe we can move to the liaison report now.
So we'll pull it up on the screen here. I'll go quickly through these. The first one is we had the Safe Street Summit with our regional partners in Broward and Miami-Dade. You can find more information at safestreetsummit.org, but we had Complete Streets Award winners for our county, the Village of Wellington for the Complete Streets Community Award, Natalie Crowley, the City of Palm Beach Gardens for the Champion Award. And then we had other nominees for our county, including board members, Councilmember Drucker, Commissioner Fox, Councilman Napoleon, and then Councilman Hamara. So congratulations to them and the nominees as well. Also, congratulations to the city of Westlake. They recently passed a Vision Zero resolution, and they're working towards that for safety. But they most recently passed a complete streets policy on February 7th to guide how they are designing and preparing for the future when it comes to complete streets. So it's also a great win there. Next is there is an I-95 at Woolbright Road interchange public meeting. FDOT will be hosting on March 8th at 6 p.m. You can find out more on their website at d4fdot.com. Next is the public participation plan. This is out for review right now and public comment. It's going to be open for feedback till March 16th. Melissa Murray with our office is going to be presenting to you all as the main action today on your agenda on that one. March is Florida Bicycle Month. There's plenty of different events that are going to be happening throughout the month. The ones that happen in communities near us in Palm Beach County will be posted on our website. One of the ones that we're doing for TPA is the staff is going to have a webinar on March 7th related to that. And then we have a bike ride on March 31st, typically in downtown West Palm Beach. And you can find more information at our website, palmbeachtpa.org/events. And then we're also hosting some more upcoming workshops for our partners. One's going to be on complete streets and implementing those on March 24th. And then there's going to be a Vision Zero workshop on April 28th. So if you want to be involved and learn more about those, you can sign up on our website. One of those bike events that another municipality is doing is going to be Royal Palm Beach. They have a bike rodeo occurring on March 25th. That's a Saturday at 9 a.m. And you can find more information on their website. And then we recently had a mobile tour of Brightline Station in Boca. And where our next set of tours are going to be for Palm Trend and Tri-Rail. So those are going to occur on April 7th. So if you're available and you want to sign up, you can go to our website /tour transit. Next governing board meeting, March 16th. And then every 4 years, we have a federal certification review, and that time has arisen for that. So the feds come down and they see how we're operating as an agency. We're going to have a public meeting for that on April 3rd at 5 p.m. if you would like to come out and show your support or also complain to them about us. And you can also, if you'd like to stop by, we'll have our open meetings with their staff all day on April 4th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's going to occur in this room. It is an open meeting for that. That's more of the getting more of the details with between all the staffs. And then our applications closed for this previous round of funding for our programs. That's the local initiatives program, the transportation alternatives, and our state road modifications priorities. On the back of your liaison report, you'll see that list. It's just in alphabetical order. They're not prioritized yet. They haven't been vetted, but it's just a summary of who's applied this round. And I'm showing on the screen as well. So it's around $18 million in local initiatives program, around $5 million in transportation alternatives program, and around $6.2 million in state road projects. So these priorities will be, these applications will be vetted to see if they are feasible, and then they'll be prioritized and scored. And then those would get into our list of priority projects for a draft, and you all will see that. And then you review and have your action on that in July. So that's all I have for you. If there's any questions, I can answer them.
Okay, I don't think we have any questions on that. Thank you so much. We're going to move to the, actually, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And so we're going to move straight to the action items for a motion to recommend approval of the TPA's public participation plan update. Melissa?
Good afternoon, everyone. If we have not met yet, my name is Melissa Murray. I'm the Public Relations Director here for the Palm Beach TPA. We're going to be going over our public participation plan today. This is our draft for 2023. This is one of our federally required documents that we have here as an MPO. So it's a very important part of what we do. And I'll be explaining a little bit about the purpose of it, what has changed since our last update in 2020, and some of the things that we do to make sure we're following what we say and tracking our public participation. So first, hopefully you've had a chance to review this online. We did put this up for public review on January 30th, but if not, you still have time to do that. So our public participation plan is really what encourages us and enables you to have public input in the transportation planning process. You are all obviously a very important part of that as members of the CAC, but we also want to make sure we're engaging with as many others as possible, getting their feedback on how we prioritize projects, how we plan projects, and how we're looking into the future. So there's a couple different parts of the PPP. One of the first ones, and a very important part, is talking about our public comment periods for any of our required documents and anything else we might be bringing to our governing board and committees. So how many days do we need to notice things? How long do people have to give feedback? And how are we actually noticing those things? So using our website, using newspapers, social media, things like that. And as I mentioned, this is a required document. We have 4 of those. So the PPP is required, as well as our TIP, our LRTP, and our UPWP. So the PPP is just as important as all of those other planning documents. It also talks about how you can get involved with the TPA. You all are obviously a very important part of that. But other ways you can get involved through activities we hold, coming to public meetings, things like that. And then it also dives into how we do that. So what are our public outreach methods and how do we track that, which I'll be explaining in just a moment. So here's just a brief look at our schedule. As I mentioned, this did open for public review on January 30th of this year. It does have a 45-day public comment period, which is longer than any of our other planning documents. So 45 days for the public to give feedback. And we do include all of the public comments that we have gotten as an appendix in the final document, similar to the TIP, LRTP, and other documents. We are presenting to committees today and tomorrow, and our governing board later this month on March 16th, and then hopefully finally adopting it that day as well. We have shared public notices for the PPP on our social media pages, as well as in our biweekly newsletter, sharing information in person, and then gathering comments through our website, which we've gotten quite a few, which we're excited about, and then sharing with you all in our advisory committees and upcoming in the governing board meeting. So the last update, as I mentioned, was in 2020. A lot of that had to do with hosting meetings virtually. So it was kind of a lot of formalities. There were a couple other things they updated as well, but this time we wanted to kind of really take a look at it and expand on what we're doing here at the TPA. So for reference, Cassidy and I started here both about 2 years ago, and we've been really focusing on this, trying to expand the work that we do for public outreach. And we wanted to detail that in the public participation plan. So as you know, we recently redesigned our website. And as part of that, we had a really big focus on ADA accessibility. There was a lot of work that we had to do to get it up to where it needed to be. We worked closely with one of our VSAC members who's blind and uses a screen reader to see how he uses the website. We made lots of adjustments over time to make sure he was able to view what you're viewing on the website. So that's a big part of obviously notifying the public is through our website. We also have a section on our deliverables. So everything that we're sharing with the public to talk about our plans, our processes, how people can get involved. So whether that's electronically with newsletters and things like that, media advisories and press releases, any print materials that we share with you all during meetings, and then digital graphics, taking photos, putting videos together. Those are all considered deliverables. As I mentioned, our website, we also have 4 social media channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And then we also have a YouTube page as well. And then, which I'll get into in just a moment, we did add a section on how we track public involvement and how we measure that. We revised our list of transportation planning acronyms. There's quite a few in there, but we had to go through and really see which ones we are using, add some in, take some out. to make sure we have the most relevant information. And then our limited English proficiency plan is a separate plan that we have at the TPA, but it's included as an appendix in the PPP. So we updated the census data in that one to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information about populations with speaking limited English. That way we know what other populations there are that we need to reach out to other than those who speak English. So when it comes to tracking all of this, our PPP is basically setting the groundwork of what we do. But as far as how we're doing, we track that every single month. So there's several ways that we do that. The first is the monthly public involvement activity report that you all receive as part of the agenda backup during your meetings every month. And this is modeled after our strategic plan. So we have several strategic plan goals, which are shown in the bottom right screenshot. You don't have to read those, but just an example. The information we have in the public involvement activity report shows our social media impressions and our social media followers in the two graphs. So how many people are we reaching? How many people are seeing the information we're sharing with the public? Whether that is something about an upcoming meeting, a safety advisory. Today, we shared information about Brightline doing high-speed testing again, starting today. So it can be a whole host of things. And then on the right side of the report is our total media coverage for that month. So that is everything from television to radio, to social media, to print, online from all of our media partners in Palm Beach County. And this is something that we've really started to focus on here at the TPA because it allows us to get information out to a lot more people than we can do on our own. And that's really important, especially when it comes to any type of planning study that we're doing, any safety information. As we soon kick off our LRTP, which we'll be talking about shortly here, we need as many people to be aware and involved as possible. I mentioned our strategic plan. We also put our annual report together to show a recap of how we've done with all of our goals. Engaging the public is goal number one of both our UPWP and our strategic plan. So I like to think that means it's the most important goal. And we show you guys what numbers we've achieved as far as how many followers we have, how many impressions, how many public meetings are we having, how many community groups are we going out to and presenting to, how many outreach events and campaigns have we done, how many people participated in those. So we're tracking these things every single day. In our UPWP, we're tracking that as well to share with FDOT every month. And then we use Google Analytics to track our website traffic, see what pages people are visiting the most, and also taking a regular look at our public comment forms on our website to see who is giving us public comment. Do they need information about a project? Who can we send that to get them that information quickly? So with that, that is all I have for today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Yes, thank you so much. Ramona and then Mark.
Melissa, thank you for the presentation, and to Cassidy as well. I guess you both have been working on this stuff. As I've said in previous meetings, I've been trying my best for my little corner of the world to share things. So 2 questions. One was, I'm glad to know how you guys have been tracking stuff. How many people do you think have contributed to the recent PPP right now? Like approximately?
I think we've gotten maybe 10 comments.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And then secondly, and this is my ignorance, where's a good place I can find the handles for Instagram and, the appropriate wording if I do
Yeah,
hashtag?
that's a good question. All of them are just at Palm Beach TPA.
Oh, it is?
We like
Okay.
to keep it simple.
All right.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you so much. And then Mark and then Myron.
Yeah, pardon me, question about social media. When you talked about your social media presence, you basically hit the 4 big ones.
Mhm.
But social media is a bit dynamic. And there are other microblogging sites that come up, and there are other opportunities out there. And I guess the question that I had is, as staff and as the public relations folks for the TPA, how do you keep your eyes on that horizon and on that landscape to see, well, maybe this is a place where we should start to establish a presence? And I'm just, because it is dynamic.
Sure.
And as those things change, do you envision a process where you would go through and evaluate or see which ones might be better, might have a better outreach?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer that in two parts. The first being Cassidy and I share information on different social media pages for different types of content. So for example, like when I shared information about Brightline doing high-speed testing today, I didn't share that on LinkedIn because the way that the LinkedIn feed is set up, you could see something from a month ago show up in your feed, and it's not helpful. So that's just the way the LinkedIn algorithm works. So that's something that we pay attention to. And then we also are always looking at different ways that we can share information. We, with our new website, have a much better capability to do a blog on our website and then share that information out. We haven't been able to get started on that just yet, just because of time. But we made sure when we redesigned the website that it was set up in a better way to be able to do that.
Yeah, because a comment I've observed, and I've seen some things. I guess there's another microblogging website out there that's trying to compete with Twitter. And that might be an opportunity also.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Myron.
Thank you. I had the experience yesterday of attending one of the outreach events. The scheduled speaker was the executive director, Valerie Nielsen, and she was sick. So she was substituted for by the chair of the TPA board, the mayor of Palm Beach Gardens. And she did a very nice job of describing what the TPA does. And in fact, spent about 5 minutes talking about citizen input through the Citizens Advisory Committee. And she dutifully read the federal and state government requirements for the membership of this committee. And this is a subject of which I beat my head against the wall every time it comes up. Because unfortunately, as we heard this today, we don't represent the areas of intellectual and commercial and economic interest that law, federal and state law says we should. We represent political jurisdictions. Two people have already said today that they represent a political jurisdiction. They don't represent the business community or the transit community or the disabled community or the other communities that federal law says this committee should represent. And part of this is a problem of the way members of this committee are appointed. We're appointed by elected representatives who are members of the board. And so when the city commissioner who asked me to serve on this, to represent City of West Palm Beach interests. That's not what the Citizens Advisory Committee is supposed to be. About 2 or 3 years ago, there was some discussion about changing the way in which the members of this committee are appointed. Years ago, when I first joined, I think it was maybe 2010, members were not appointed politically. And so we had at that time a member who was really interested in transit and always spoke up about the transit issues. And we had a member, we had all these areas represented. But I don't remember when it was that they decided that the political members of the TPA board were going to now appoint members. And so we've got cards that say City of West Palm Beach. So I'm just it's not terribly, it's possible that we could be distributed properly according to the federal and state rules. And I'm wondering if we took a survey about 3 or 4 years ago, and the result was terribly skewed. And I would like to see in our report card, you have a report, in the PPP, we have a report card that says, we had so many views in this, this social media outlet and all that sort of stuff. So many people did this. I'd like to see a report card about this committee. Does this committee reflect the interests and perspectives that it is supposed to reflect.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I'm actually gonna have Andrew respond to that because I think that might be a question about CAC representation that maybe the liaison could answer better than me, since I'm not necessarily involved in committee makeup, but good point.
Mhm. I mean, Myron, we understand your points on that, and I don't have all the history of the past few years here to discuss sort of what's transpired. But last strategic plan, we did sort of look at an assessment, reassess that, and came to you all with information about how sort of other places have done it in the past, and we went to our TPA governing board subcommittee to discuss that as well, and there wasn't really any progress made on a different formation of what you're talking about, going towards that direction. So it sort of stopped there from making any headways on that. And then to the other point you mentioned about the statistics of this committee, we had that census that went out about a year ago, and we had that feedback, which is sort of like your own self-assessment of where you are for what you represent based on those categories that you mentioned. That's another one we could probably update at least from that perspective to be current on that. But that's really all I have for you right now on that.
I think we should put that in the PPP, an appendix or something or other about some appendix about the CAC and how it does or does not reflect the requirements of the law, that we represent citizens as opposed to political jurisdiction, citizen interests. And if we don't, how the TPA is going to move toward making it so.
Yeah, we do have in our operating procedures, we lay out, what are the requirements for it for a CAC. But when Myron, it sounds like you're going more towards what's the action plan to ensure we are in compliance and providing that language specifically in some type of document. Is that sort of?
Yes. Yes, we have a vision zero, and we have a description of how we're going to try to get toward zero. We have a description of what this CAC is supposed to look like. So we should have some kind of a plan for getting there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Paula, you have a comment?
Thank you. I know that when you've done the survey and the self-select in terms of what category you line in, I think that you could probably say representative District 2 and housing, or, environmental, or whatever the other category is to better identify. But if you want to understand the history in terms of how it got to be politically chosen, it's because the governing board decides. And if you really want to see a change to how we meet the makeup, I think that the first step is to try to explain to the governing board that we would like them to no longer be the gateway to picking citizens for this board. And if they support that, then I think that this organization has the ability to start to go further out. But until we change the dynamics of, one of the reasons that I continue to vote against State Road 7 is because who appointed me to this board. And, I represent the constituents to that county commissioner. And my personal opinion this is not the place for it. And I understand that. So what I hear you saying is trying to get some of the politics out of the policy and the decision making. And so you have to go to the politicians and ask them to give up some of their power.
I think that's right. And that's why I would like to see in an appendix of this report a description of the extent to which we do or do not reflect the requirements of a CAC to sort of give so that as a means for informing the board. So, I mean, it's going to take a long time to get the board to change its mind, I think, although I think it was 3 years ago, there was a discussion about about doing that. We just have to put it to them, and if you know, we have to put it to them.
I think that thank you so much for the presentation. I honestly, I am a user of social media, and I believe that we are all of different age group, and we all use different platforms. You know, so of course, within my age group, we are Instagrammers. I like to say kudos. You know, I love the variation and the different authentic. It's really authentic on the messages that you issue, and it's very relatable for my age group. I also think that as an agency, you have more followers than Broward County Transit. So congratulations on that.
Nice.
And so I think you should really give yourself like as part of this report card, you know, try to I would recommend like looking at other agencies within this area and see how we can you know, be better than them, and how we can size you know, just really keep ourselves engaged. And I think, you know, just really quick assessment of what other TPOs are doing and see how we can be better than them as part of this. James. And then-
Yeah, Melissa, great presentation, and the plan looks great. I just want to know that, you know, I volunteer on a couple other boards and so forth, and sometimes I feel underutilized of way it could be of service to some of the boards I do sit on. It's not for my lack of wanting to try, it's just the lack of communication sometimes with the organization. That being said, I can speak for myself, and I don't know if anybody else would agree, but if there are specific things that you would want us to put out into the community, emailing them directly to us, you know, versus us having to follow your social media or regurgitate an email blast. If there's something you want to circulate, like for instance, Brightlines, you know, you could send an email and I would gladly share it, you know, as far as a prepackaged content, GIF, meme, whatever. I think that might be a really great way to utilize some of those.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take all the help we can get.
Be out of it'll be off brand for me because I only post about food. So Lily, you have a comment.
I just want to say thank you so much, Melissa. On a similar note about social media, you mentioned Instagram, which is a really great point. Capturing younger people who are interested in transportation is a very hard feat, but there are a lot of younger people who are interested specifically in public transit and alternative means of transit. I think maybe considering going out into high schools maybe, or just areas with younger people, youth clubs, that kind of stuff, and letting them know not only what you guys do, but also that they have a role in this as well. You know, there's a lot of apprehension around younger people that, you know, our communities are definitely built for adults. You know, you have to have a car to get anywhere. And so if we're open and we're honest that we are working towards these projects that allow more people to get more accessible transportation, I think the TPA will find that more people support them than they might know.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
No, it's a really good idea. And because like if you look at the demographics of like Vision Zero demographics of the high crash ratings, they're actually you know, between what 15 through 19. That's basically high school students are entering into the roadway network with as first time drivers. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other comments? If we have no other comment, I believe we don't have any public comments on this item.
There are no public comments.
Perfect. Can we entertain a motion for Melissa?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by James and a second by Ryan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're going to an information item of the TPA Vision 2050 LRTP.
Good afternoon. Nathan George, the Long Range Transportation Plan Coordinator. So I'm here to talk to you today about Vision 2050. We're kicking off this long range plan. And I find it's very difficult to very solidly think about what transportation is going to look like 27 years in the future. That's a date that's really ominous. So I'm going to take you through a journey, but instead of looking forward, we're going to look back. So let's start in 1996. This is the year that the first Mission Impossible movie released in theaters. So imagine the technology that you saw, the cutting edge James Bond type stuff we're seeing. It's that time frame that in 1996, the Volvo 850 is probably arguably one of the safest vehicles on the road. It's got first generation side impact airbags. It's got some advanced safety features like side zone impact safety areas. So, you know, really safe car for that time frame. But arguably today, probably less so. The Nokia 7000 communicator is one of the first generation smartphones. It's a flip phone with mechanical keys. So this is a technology that we're looking at if we look 27 years into the past and think about, you know, what's changed since then. We've got Teslas that arguably almost can drive themselves. And I'm picking on them a little bit because they can't drive themselves, but they've got all these enhanced detection and technologies that allow them to communicate and see what's happening in the environment around them. You can summon it with your phone. So really enhanced technology. And then our smartphones have gotten amazing, you know, color screens, they're very big. They're so big, they're almost a tablet, putting that into your pocket. So when you compare that to this communicator, it'd be like putting eyeglasses with a bunch of coins into your pocket. It's amazing how far we've come in 27 years. So we have to think about 27 years in the future. What does that mean? And I want to inspire you all to think in that sort of light. What does 27 years of advancement mean in the transportation sector as we start thinking about this process and kicking off a plan for how we get there? So for anybody new to this process, what is a long-range transportation plan? Most of you will be familiar, but this is our farthest looking ahead complete document. What is going to be in our region in 25 years? So we're establishing our goals. What do we want to be when we grow up? What kind of transportation facilities do we want to have when we get there? We're identifying what those regionally significant improvements are going to be. So, you know, this is not talking about sidewalks in your neighborhood so you can make it to your neighbor's house and have dinner. This is the facilities that connect us to the region, that connect us globally. And we have those global connections in our region. So it's important to have that sort of a lens. These are investments that better connect us. It's a 25-year horizon. So it gives us a good opportunity to look far out into the future. But we don't have to have those precise answers. You know, going back to the previous slide, we don't need to understand exactly what we need to have in 25 years because we update this plan every 5 years. So every 5 years, as more of that vision becomes solid, as we understand the influence of technology, and we have the opportunity to adapt and pivot. So that's the long range transportation plan in short. What's driving our decisions? You know, when we say transportation as planners, historically, traffic has been a major factor in what is driving our transportation decisions. But TPA has been very good about recognizing that it's also about options. So to combat traffic, to address how we need to travel, it's about options. And I used a streetcar here, but this could be, you know, shifting off of the road freight to on rail freight. It could be more shipping containers. There are a lot of different ways that things can move that are options. So it's about finding that right balance, striking a good balance in the network and how it accommodates our needs. And what we're really talking about here is quality of life. So as we improve options, as we create better opportunity for our transportation network to be efficient, hopefully the end result is that we have a more livable and more desirable place for folks to live. And we're assimilating a lot of additional growth in this area. So it's really important that we're able to adapt. This is a results-oriented planning process. We came here last month and talked to you about performance measures, and we're going to talk about that head on. Performance-based approach. We have to be able to measure the investments that we're going to be making and say they are actually going to make a difference. If they are not going to make a difference, we need to change the scope, or that project is not worth delivering. So we are measuring all of these ideas against their performance or what they should achieve in terms of performance. I'll talk about how we'll measure that a little bit here shortly. This is also a plan that identifies our comprehensive needs and desires. It doesn't necessarily mean that those needs and desires are funded, which is the third point here, but it does mean that we need to identify what are the ideas that we have, what are we going to test, what might we be able to do that will improve transportation in our region. But then we only can fund so much. We have limited funds, so that's what we'll ultimately get to at the end of this process as a financially constrained plan. Here's what we know we can achieve within that time frame. So that's what we'll end up with. And we wanted to highlight a couple of additional considerations and factors. Some of this is a little bit new or an alteration from the 2045 plan that we currently have adopted. A big change that was in the bipartisan infrastructure law is what they called a housing linkage component, the opportunity to look at transportation, look at housing, and how do those two relate to one another. Hopefully more proactively thinking about how transportation can influence where we can absorb more of that growth. So we'll be looking at housing. That's something we have the opportunity to address, but we'll be working with our consultant team to figure out exactly what that means for our region. Another major factor that you've heard a lot about if you're following the Biden administration and what they've been talking about in the transportation sector is equity and Justice 40. And that's an acknowledgement that transportation impacts the communities where we make these improvements. And so making sure that we look at it through a lens, are these impacts disproportionate on the local community? So that's another factor that we will have in mind as we're looking at these projects. And it's something that we're raising in our conversations with our regional partners like FDOT and our adjacent communities. Scenario planning is that opportunity to test these ideas and ground in some level of reality what these investments will mean when they are made. And so the 561 corridors, our transit enhancements, that's something that we want to continue to solidify. What are these transit investments going to achieve based on what we can fund? So we need to be able to test those and see what are we going to actually accomplish with our transit investments. And then I mentioned, the Tesla example. The role of technology in transportation is one of the most exciting aspects. One of the things that drew me to look at this opportunity to help work on this plan. There are so many exciting enhancements that connected and autonomous and electrification, how that's going to influence the transportation sector is undeniable. So those will be really exciting opportunities to look at how we're improving environmental quality or how we're maybe making some enhancements in safety because the cars are talking to the street or talking to each other. So there's a lot of really great opportunity in that area, and we look forward to exploring it. Wanted to highlight for you just a few of the first steps. This is a 2-year process, so I'm just going to touch on a few of the initial steps, and we'll continue to come back as we get through this process. The first is looking at our goals and objectives. These are not new. This is pulled directly out of the 2045 plan. So these 5 goals, you hear us talk a lot about the goal 2 to 5, safe, efficient, connected, and multimodal. So that's nothing new. And then we also have this goal that in 2045 was called preserve. I'm encouraging us to look at maybe that term needs to be more like resilient or something that captures that expression of making sure that these investments are resilient. And so we'll be looking at each of these to see what are the specific objectives, how might we change things a little bit from what we did in 2045, but largely this should be more of a validation exercise, I would hope. And this will keep us mission driven with what TPA has already been doing. So that's great news that we already have a really clear vision. And second gets kind of to what Melissa was just talking about, our public involvement plan. So we will have a specific public involvement plan for the development of the LRTP. I put a picture in here of a bunch of kids walking to a school. They walked a school day. One of the areas that I have found in my planning practice that's very successful is to go to where people are. It's far less successful to say, hey, I want public to come to this room and meet with me here because that's convenient for me and it's on my schedule. So you should see, as we're going to the community, a lot more of that active engagement with folks where they are, going and listening and hearing what folks have to say, This body is made up of members of the public, so it is very important to us that we are engaging, that we are hearing from folks, and the best way to do that is going to be getting out into the community. I put in a reminder here for the other committees that we are trying to get engagement from the agency, municipal, and agency stakeholders. I will share with you guys in a minute how you all can stay connected. So here's our schedule. Goals and objectives. We will be working on that through the spring. So we should be reporting back to committees and the board sometime later this spring. And then we'll get into the process of projects and identifying what those projects might be. There will be a call for projects at some point later this year. So that's something that we'll start that process in the summer. Hope to conclude sometime in the winter towards the end of this year. And then that modeling and scenario development process, so testing how those projects will influence our region. We'll be working on that starting late this year. Hope to conclude sometime in the spring. And then this document, the plan itself, needs to be adopted by December of next year, 2024. That will conclude our 2-year time frame to develop this plan. We hope to have a lot of materials throughout the process, but a lot of those materials coming to folks towards the summer and early fall next year as we get close to adoption. For everybody who's not one of those municipal stakeholders, we are working on and hope to launch very soon an updated LRTP page on TPA's website. This is where you'll be able to find information as we work through the process, as we generate new information to share, as we have opportunities for folks to engage. All of that will live on TPA's website at this URL, palmbeachtpa.org/LRTP. So a lot of information will go there. We'll also have the public survey. So just a heads up to stay tuned, bookmark this page, check it regularly. If anybody has questions about where we are in the process, feel free to email me or call me, and I'll be happy to give you an update. And with that, I conclude the presentation and be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Paula, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. We've been hearing for a long time about the impacts of the electric vehicle on all the other transportation alternatives. And it's very exciting. The technology is, I think, something that brings us to what you said in the beginning. You're looking at, like Mission Impossible. You're looking at these futuristic things. And this is where I have a hard time figuring out how to take this program and apply it to what it is you're trying to accomplish, because a lot of the impacts to autonomous vehicles have to do with physical conditions on the ground and how much they're going to be able to identify and respond to. And the more practice they have, the algorithms begin to create a knowledge base. But we have a failing infrastructure around the country and in our cities and our municipalities. And one of the ways I've always thought we could move this further along is if we could use these funds in a more, and this is the language that you can't use in transportation dollars, which is repair and fix. It's always about new and addition. So do you have a way that we could perhaps build some bridges to utilizing those funds with some of these objectives?
Yeah, I'd say yes. It's a conversation that I feel, we had very limited information in the field in our 2045 called Transportation Systems Management and Operation, which is effectively where communicating technologies all fall under that umbrella, if you will. And that's one of the areas where I've been, reaching out to our partners and saying, we need to have a conversation about where county specifically, but other county and FDOT, about how we're going to be making investments and leveraging that technology, because we're already starting to see the first generation of infrastructure communication. So like how cars talk to traffic signals, for example, we're starting to see those first generations deployed. The county's already starting to make investments in those areas. And so making sure that we understand, from the view of this plan, it's understanding what that system is supposed to be, because the system only works if all the components are there, kind of to your point. So if you have a signal that can talk to a car, but the signal can't talk to their traffic operations center, because they don't have a communications link. So it's, we need to have a full understanding of what all of those components will be so we can tell that story. Because that's the first step, is being able to explain, how will these investments that we're already making, just to be clear, we are already starting to make investments that will deliver that first generation of connected technology, that they will actually achieve some benefit, and making sure that if we are missing something in the system, we identify it, because we're looking at funding. TPA, our goal is to make sure that we're funding a system. So, that's where, at least on my part, I've been trying to drive that conversation and make sure we're getting a robust understanding so we can share that as we develop this next 2050 report.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. We have Myron and then James.
Thank you. Can you say a word or two about the relationship between the long-range transportation LRTP planning process and comprehensive plans?
Sure. Yeah, we actually, one of my first global assignments, if you will, when I got to TPA, was to reach out and speak with our agency, or just reach out and engage our agency partners, so the municipalities, to share with them we're getting ready to kick off this process. So back in November, we sent an email asking who are the folks we need to include, so we're communicating with the appropriate parties, and what are your comprehensive plans? What do you have in your capital improvement plans? Because we need to understand what your vision is. All of those plans identify the improvements that we need to test, and we need to understand the regional significance of them. I would say that's been a very high level conversation at this point, and we've gotten some limited information. It's really important. What I shared with our technical advisory committee this morning is that having their plans, having them think about these investments and be able to frame and tell us what they envision as transportation improvements is really important. That's a process they should be doing continually, the same way we need to continually be planning as an agency. So they can, when we say we want to work your improvements into our models, that they're not starting to think about that from scratch. It's not to say you can't come up with some good ideas on the fly, but hopefully you've been thinking about, where do we need to improve roads? Where do we need to enhance safety? Where might we need a different connection? Because when those are well-documented planning recommendations, they're easier to get funded. They're easier to show planning consistency between the comprehensive plan and TPA's plan. So, we'll continually be working on that process until we get to the point of scenario development, I would say, to help identify potential improvements. But I would say to all of our agency partners, all the municipalities, it's incredibly important to have a good plan in place to help inform that conversation. So we're not trying to have that conversation and identify new ideas at the same time.
Okay, James?
Thank you very much for the presentation. You talked a lot about how technology changes and how some ways it happens in unexpected ways. We are fortunate to be told by many major automakers that electrification is coming. And in fact, most of them are saying around the 2030, 2035 is when most of their fleets, most of the new auto sales will be electric. So by 2050, gas cars will be significantly outnumbered, most likely. That being said, we traditionally talk about infrastructure for transportation. Is there any way that some of that infrastructure to support that electrification might fall under the purview of our LRTP, or how that would work with municipalities, state agencies, and so forth, to make sure that that infrastructure is here to support that?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest that we've seen recently, the federal government issued draft guidelines for EV charging, which is something I understand several committees have been interested, based on like the emission reduction aspect of how electrification will influence that specifically. So Fed has put out their draft guidelines that includes a lot of information about where these charging stations should be located, what the protocol should be, how much they can charge for the energy use. So, that's really a conversation that's happening at the federal level that's going to influence where do we need to make those investments. I would say this plan is probably not going to need to be too prescriptive, because we're still early enough in the process That's going to be more like a state-led initiative. And then as we start to see, fast forward 2 or 3 generations of this LRTP update, you're probably going to see a need to go back and look at equity considerations. Do we have areas that don't have enough charging stations? And do we need to make some investments in those places? Right now, it's going to be more of a corridor-based approach of like, these are electric charging corridors, and then maybe we'll start to see some consideration for neighborhood charging. But I'd say that's globally the biggest area, and probably something that is a bit farther out that the LRTP won't have to address specifically.
Okay, no, because I would hate to be in a position where we're relying on the goodness of developers to put charging stations in everywhere we think there should be. So, thank you though.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I just was wondering if you could speak a bit more to the multimodal aspect of this vision. We're talking a lot about technology and Teslas, and you're right, we never know where technology is going to end up, but we do know that wherever it ends up, the people with access to it immediately are going to be the wealthiest among us. So I'm just curious about in this plan, where we see and where we provide for and protect all these people who won't have access to this cutting edge, but still are going to get cut by it.
Could I clarify real quick? Are you referring to like bike and ped considerations, or are we talking about like folks who just have traditional cars?
So bike and peds especially, and then also just, where safety comes into that and accidents and how this kind of autonomous vehicles are going to be affecting that.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little early to reflect too much on the autonomous vehicle conversation, because there's so much uncertainty right now around like the quality of the pedestrian and bike detection systems and collision avoidance in that area. I've, seen a lot of research about how those systems are performing very poorly compared to all the like vehicle on vehicle crash type reductions, and that technology has been a lot more efficient in that area. So that's, just an acknowledgement that technology in that area is going to improve, and we'll see some big gains. And there are a lot of considerations there on like different platforms, like a low cost EV versus a low cost vehicle with collision avoidance versus high cost. You might see better quality in those systems. I think from a bike and ped perspective, our focus, one of our major goals is safety. Everybody says safety first. I think a lot of people try to accomplish that and maybe, say safety first and then something else becomes a higher priority. But TPA, one of the things that drew me here is that safety really is a priority. So we will be heavily emphasizing that as we discuss projects, making sure that safety doesn't get deprioritized. Maybe that's a good example as we look at different projects. And we will be having additional review of our bike and ped network. Those were aspects of the scoping that we put in with our consultant to look at, where do we have gaps in the bike network or the ped network? How can we be prioritizing investments in those areas to complete streets? Put in a plug for that Complete Streets and Vision Zero workshops that we have upcoming. Those are focus areas that we're frankly not going to let our foot off the gas, to borrow a pun. But we're certainly going to continue to drive that conversation back to safety in everything that we talk about. And I'm a safety focused planner. So as the individual leading the effort to develop this plan, I can assure you it will be safety focused.
Thank you. Mark and then Myron.
I guess my observation going forward and thinking about, again, how things have changed, as you pointed out, one of the challenges I see, and maybe something that needs to be addressed in some ways, is the user interface. We're seeing autonomous vehicles, we're seeing a lot of controlled traffic and vehicles communicating with each other, but they're going to have people in them. And people are going to want to have a wheel in front of them and 2 pedals. And they're going to want it that way for a very long time. And people that are pedestrians, even though they know that there's vehicles moving back and forth, are going to want to see a crosswalk light. And people are still going to want to see traffic lights. And how you interface with the consumer of all of that safety information, perhaps, and how you deal with that. The reason I'm thinking about that is, and I keep going back to it, think about your telephone. Well, telephone still has a dial, and we still have a QWERTY keyboard that was designed to slow down typists when it was originally developed. And those interfaces have stayed in place. Not necessarily because they're the most efficient, but because they're the ones that the consumer is most familiar with. And moving forward from now to 2050, how do you either transition away from some of those user interfaces and get the users to accept that? Or how do you maintain those user interfaces that we have and integrate it with the future technology development? Because again, at the end of the day, we're the consumers of all of this stuff, and the people that are in their vehicles, or the pedestrians, or the cyclists, are the consumers of the traffic service that's being provided. And that interface is one that I think you have to be sensitive to, because that's, the people are the ones who are going to decide what they want to see.
I think that's a great point. There was a really interesting article about the potential to add a new traffic signal that would just be like a white light. I don't know why they said white, but basically, how are we going to have signals for these connected and autonomous vehicles? How are we going to communicate to the mixed fleet of driver versus driverless cars? And what does that mean from a technology perspective? Those are conversations that we probably won't have answers to by the time we adopt this document. But it's certainly conversations that we understand are happening. Those are huge changes that will happen at the federal level. And one point that I do want to offer about the user interface is that I'll humanize myself for a second. I'm one of the folks who lives in Wellington, in a Western community outside of West Palm Beach. And when I drive in the morning, the user interface that I see more commonly than I would like to see is folks holding their cell phone like this while they drive. And so I've tried to take a tally. It's probably about 50% of drivers that I see on my commute in are distracted using their cell phones while they drive. That user interface that they have selected is distraction. So that's an acknowledgement that I plan to highlight very clearly in this plan. Distraction is a rising challenge that we have to face from a safety perspective. I've seen a lot of good research about how it's influencing our transportation system. That also influences operations. So when you talk about the user interface, that's the lens I want to shine on as we take this plan forward, that we've got some real challenges to give folks an alternative so they can play on their device and not be behind the wheel.
Thank you, Myron.
I just want to say that in 2050, I'll be 110 years old. And I hope the transportation system that exists at the time will facilitate my mobility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lily.
It's a really great point, Myron. I just wanted to see, first of all, great presentation. I just wanted to see, you mentioned housing linkage. Is there going to be considerations in place, because Palm Beach County is very diverse in its amount of urbanism? We have a lot of communities that are really far apart from public transit systems. Is that going to be something that's taken into account? I grew up very far west. I grew up on 441 by that tomato packing plant. I don't know if anyone knows where that is, but it's in the middle of nowhere. Or when I was a kid, not anymore. It is a place now. When I was a kid, it wasn't. And I was wondering just, how do you plan on grappling with that, especially because we have a really built out north-south transit, but our east to west is, I know there's plans in place, but it's kind of non-existent right now.
Yeah, so TPA in the 2045 plan put together this transit vision that's called the 561. So 5 north south, 6 east west, one complete system of transit. And that's really the vision for how we can capture the majority of the urbanized area, because that really, captures like Military and East, and then some of the east-west routes that go out towards Wellington, Royal Palm. And that's kind of the transit vision, if you will, that the component that captures how can we take some of this density and start to peel people out of their cars and get them into transit, make it more accessible, make it more frequent and more reliable. So that's, I will call it the planning side of the transit component. But how we're going to look at housing is more of a traditional approach of, we're looking at where has growth occurred? And then one of the scenarios we want to look at is where could growth occur? Where could we capture growth in these areas that are better transit served or served by maybe some shift in, there are a lot of different ways that people could move around without being in a single occupant vehicle. So, there are opportunities for us to look at how transportation could shape the growth that does occur over the next 27 years. And I think that's the scenario development process that I was referring to. We'll see some interesting takeaways there in terms of how much growth we can capture into a transit network, or how much of that we can fund over the time frame. Those may be questions that we can't even answer for a 2050 plan. It might take another 1 or 2 cycles to start to get some more solid answers in those regards. But it's certainly where we are trying to acknowledge that this is an urban community. It's an urban region. We are very well connected to our partners, especially to the south, so Broward and Miami. And we'll be looking very carefully at how housing could maybe grow in a more compatible fashion with our transportation network, as opposed to just getting a lot more cars and putting more strain on the existing network and trying to then combat that with traditional highway capacity and widening. So that's, that hopefully that gives you a framework for how we're approaching it today. And we'll be presenting results of that process over the next, say, 12 to 14 months. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I actually have 3 very specific comments I want to make. One is I want to build on what Paul said earlier about failing infrastructure, and there's really no funding for maintenance, especially being AV and the chapter in the MUTCD has a very specific mandate. There's federal mandates out there that cities, not just the state and the county governments, but cities have to maintain their pavement markings up to a certain level of retroreflectivity. And those are infrastructures that is currently not being prioritized because, cities can barely just pave their streets. How can you get new painting down? So that's one point. Is there opportunities to build on that? You talked about systems and management to definitely build on that, so that it'll give mechanisms for locals, right? Each one of our cities that we represent, a mechanism to receive additional funding. The second point I'd like to make is, from the having knowledge and experience from the 2045 plan, there has been some projects that was on the 2045 plans that adds unnecessary capacity in the corridors that just there isn't any capacity to be to be built. For example, building a 3-lane bridge, because you're looking at the link analysis. It's like, oh, a 3-lane will have this much capacity, but where is that center turn lane going on a bridge? So, some of those elements, like I had comments a few years ago, and I'm going to continue to have those comments. And then lastly, I think from what Kate has mentioned is safety and safety first. I think we already know where our crashes are happening. They're on the state and the county roads, and those particular projects are not being prioritized. I feel that the state and the county has taken a stance of being reactive versus being proactive. From a citizen advisory standpoint, I'd really like to see those projects being we be more proactive and having those projects as like demands for those type of projects. So those are just my 3 points that I like to make, and I'm excited.
Thank you for your comments. So noted, and I share your enthusiasm about the safety first approach.
I don't think we have any public comments on this, and I think thank you so much for your presentation. So we are the next few items are information only, and I think we'll see each other on February 16th, and that's it. Meeting's adjourned. Right? I'm sorry, April 5th. We have a long break. Oh no, it's only a month. It's March already. Oh my gosh.
All right.